Hello, how are you doing today? Thank you for being with us for our second section. Just getting everything settled in and making sure all the panelists are here and all that. So my name is Joshua Bradshaw. I'm an health policy fellow here at the Office of African American Affairs. Just want to thank everybody that's been a part of this team here. New Mexico Black Leadership Council in city of Albuquerque, and our first two panelists, Professor Al-Ranjani and Senator Pope. And so this is going to be the multidisciplinary panel, and let's get started. So New Mexico is often known for its low ranking and isolated experience for African Americans. We are also known for innovative programs that tackle social issues. We welcome a diverse panel of professionals and advocates that will share this exciting work to suggest solutions. We welcome you to add any of your comments and questions into the chat box and the Q&A forum. Information for this event will be gathered and published as a tool for moving forward to change our youth. And just today, we're joined by Miss Tonya Covington. Tonya Covington is a trainer, community health worker. Tonya has been engaged in training, consulting, and coaching around diversity, equity, and inclusion for many years, and is experienced in cultural humility training. She has skills in coalition building, program implementation, capacity building, facilitation, mediation, and conflict resolution, development and consistency building. We are also joined by Moneka Stevens. Moneka Stevens serves as a program development catalyst, facilitating the development and improved practice and sustainability of future-focused education programs and initiatives. She is a former director of community engagement at the Health Leadership High School, and she served as a former director of the New Mexico Youth Alliance, a statewide youth council connected to the community transformation through policy development. We also are joined by Leon Howard. Leon Howard has been defending people's civil rights and liberties in the state of New Mexico for over a decade. Leon is a legal director at the American Civil Liberties Union of New Mexico, where he leads the affiliate's legal department and litigation efforts. And we are also joined by Carmela Romero. Carmela Romero is currently employed at Bernalillo County Youth Services Center as the Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative Administrator. Ms. Romero was previously elected 3 times as a board member for the New Mexico Criminal Justice Association Board for the state of New Mexico as a juvenile representative, and was awarded the Juvenile Justice Champion Award at the 29th Annual Children's Law Institute in 2021. Hello. So how is everybody doing?
Good. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Great. It's great to see y'all too. So I think I'll just start off with Carmelo. We'll just start off with the first question, which is just, can you explain what you're currently working on or have implemented in the fields of JDAI and restorative justice?
Sure. Thank you, Joshua. So hello, everyone. I am here at the Bernalillo County Juvenile Detention and Youth Services Center. In 2005, we began as a model site with the Annie Casey Foundation for Juvenile Justice Reform. Historically, we've been amongst many of the first to really push initiatives forward here in the state of New Mexico, as well as the nation. So I'm happy to be part of that team here at the Bernalillo County Youth Services Center. With some of the initiatives based on our core strategies for the juvenile detention initiatives efforts, we really take into consideration what the Annie Casey Foundation has really lent towards our core strategies, which is really about collaboration, collaboration within our community, collaboration with our young people, collaboration within the system. We often decide and use data as data decision making. We're very driven by data here at the Bernalillo County Youth Services Center. We also look at objective admissions. How do youth come into the Youth Services Center when they are picked up by law enforcement? And is it really necessarily a requirement for them to stay based on an objective admission? We also have alternatives to detention at the Youth Services Center. Currently, I oversee the community custody program, which is an alternative to detention where young people who are awaiting pretrial services can be supervised in the home in the community rather than staying in detention pending their trial or possible adjudication, etc. We look at special detention populations. We look at reducing racial and ethnic disparities and really looking at case processing and conditions of confinement. So those are really the core of what we look at here at the Bernalillo County Youth Services Center in large committees and small committees, trying to get some collaboration with our community partners. And that's really where we're heading towards here in the future. In particular, a couple initiatives that we've really worked on really in this last year and during the COVID time is really focusing on our youth who are on the deep end of the system. It's our deep end initiative. Young people who tend to cycle through the system, taking a closer look at those cases and see where we can assist in terms of looking at what parts of the system may be dropping the ball or really looking at it through a different lens. Through what we're utilizing right now is the quality service review through New Mexico State University. We take a case-by-case basis and really look at the impact of a youth from the beginning of the touch of the system to where they are at today, and really analyzing that to see where we can improve system and system improvement can occur. The other key piece that I recently contracted with regards to racial and ethnic disparities is we recently partnered with the New Mexico Black Leadership Council. As we gathered data on African American youth, what we found was that the average length of stay for African American youth on probation tended to be more days than other youth. So what we found is on average, it was 264 days a youth would spend on probation in comparison to Hispanic youth at 231 days or white youth at 181 days. We also looked at the types of offenses, a lot closer of top 4 offenses for African American youth. What we found was it's often frequently since 2018 has been historically battery on a household member. And so we partnered with New Mexico Black Leadership in looking at taking a closer look at some of this data to really figure out how can the community support some of the efforts, whether it's mental health resources, whether it's programming, whether it's diversion, how can we assist young people from coming into the system? And so we are so lucky that we've been able to partner with Kathy McGill and her group to really survey youth in the community who've been through the system, get some fine points onto understanding why youth end up in the juvenile justice system, and really is it a criminal act? Today we're talking about the criminalization of young people and really taking a closer look at that. And so by utilizing our community partners, I think for a long time in juvenile justice, it's been mostly the system making the decision and not really engaging with our community partners. And I think as we move forward, we're trying to shift that narrative. We currently also have the Albuquerque Youth Justice Collaborative, where many of our partners in the community are really trying to reimagine juvenile justice from a community lens and how to support our young people. So there's many initiatives that I hope in the next year and many collaborations with our community partners, that we continue to build system related stakeholders in the community to really reimagine what juvenile justice can look like for youth, and hopefully one day, you know, maybe they'll shut us down. So, we really need to find those initiatives and really look at how we can best serve our young people in the community.
Thank you so much for your response, Carmela. And I'm happy to see that there's like a lot of energy in this movement to, change our system and change how we treat our young people. So I'd like to go to the next panelist. So I'll go to Leon Howard. I'm going to ask you the same question, just kind of explain what you're currently working on and or have implemented in the fields of JDAI and restorative justice.
Yeah, thank you, Joshua, and happy to be here this afternoon. Wow, Carmela, that was a lot of good stuff there. And I think something I may touch on later, and one of the things we can really commend the county for is collecting this type of data so you can identify the disparities. And the county is where we were able to get a lot of data on a case I worked on at the kind of charging point of Black youth in our state, or at least in our community here in Bernalillo County. Some of the things, so I'm the legal director at the ACLU of New Mexico, and I think you guys just had a legal panel. And so I don't want to duplicate a lot of that conversation. And what I can tell you is about some of our initiatives at the ACLU of New Mexico, at least in the legal department, that touch on this. We're not instrumentally involved in JDAI initiatives directly, but I think some of the initiatives we work on touch on that. And one case that I can tell you we're working on is a case in the New Mexico Court of Appeals to ensure that children are protected in schools from discrimination under our New Mexico Human Rights Act. This case actually comes about as a result of discrimination against Native children, which we see a lot of disparities in that community as well. And the outcome of the case, we hope, is going to protect all students from discrimination under our state Human Rights Act. That the specific facts of that case had to do with a Native student being called a derogatory term by a teacher, and another student having their hair cut by the teacher. We're in coalition. I know you guys just heard from Professor Miriam Aranjani around a lot of the disparities and issues you see with school suspensions and problems with law enforcement officers in schools. One of our big kind of projects we have in our legal department right now has to do with the extreme sentencing of youthful offenders. And so we work to unwind a lot of extreme sentences for people who committed crimes when they were juveniles. And so that obviously has a disparate impact on Black youthful offenders. And then lastly, we are counsel again in Yazi Martinez, and that case, which kind of showed a disparate disparate outcomes and unconstitutional education that children receiving in specific categories, talking English language learners, children with learning disabilities, and Native American children. And the case is really silent on Black children, although I think there's a lot of overlap there. And I'm really excited about the Black Education Act and seeing how that jives with some of the outcomes in the Yazi Martinez case. And so those are just touching on some of the issues we're involved in our legal department, and looking forward to this conversation here today.
Awesome, awesome. That was great. Thank you for sharing. We'll go to our next panelist, Moneka Stevens. Just kind of explain what you're currently working on and or have implemented in this field of JDAI and restorative justice.
Thank you so much, Joshua. So excited to be here with panelists and others in our virtual community. Appreciate what's been shared as well. And I might elevate some of the things that Carmela shared because we overlap often in our work together. And so I used to serve on the Juvenile Justice Disparities Advisory Committee a long time ago. And right now I serve on the Juvenile Justice Advisory Council with the Governor's Office and lots of other folks really looking at data and the disparities that are impacting our communities. This was possibly shared from other panelists. In New Mexico, Africans, and I identify as African because our ancestors, were kidnapped and came from Africa, and that's our heritage. So when I say African, I mean Black. So here in New Mexico, the African population is 3%, but we know that data shows that we're 6 times more likely our young people to be incarcerated, and adults almost 7 times more likely. And those are huge disparities. Those are numbers like Louisiana and Alabama that have a large African population. And so systemic racism is rooted in all those factors and have been since our ancestors were kidnapped from Africa. And so I'm also part of the Albuquerque Justice for Youth Collaborative that many organizations here. I saw New Mexico Black leadership in the space, and Together for Brothers and lots of organizations are part of. That's being hosted by La Placita, and that's also being funded by the Annie Casey Foundation to dream, to have the permission to dream and build together. What can spaces and places be to better support our young people as an alternative to incarceration? So there's over 25 organizations in Tiwa territory, that's Albuquerque, dreaming together in partnership with young people, in partnership with people who have been impacted by the system, whether they've been incarcerated themselves. Many of them started as a young person and continued into adulthood, or there's young people who are transitioning out of the system as well. And so it's so, that's so critical. Most recently, we participated, myself, Southwest Organizing Project, Fronteristas, and Working Classrooms in developing some transformative justice curriculum and training, where young people were able to do writing activism and art activism around topics to really look at punitive punishment. And we know that finally, when data was released from Albuquerque Public Schools, the suspension levels, and of course, we always knew that African youth, students of color that are indigenous, Chicano, Mexicano, English language learners are impacted at high rates. And even right prior to the pandemic, the numbers doubled of young people being suspended. And so so the work that I've been doing is very similar to what's been shared, is in partnership with community, how to create solutions that are community driven, that are engaged with young people, that are not punitive, that are more around restorative justice, because we know 1 day in detention is too many days in detention. And as Carmela mentioned, we know that African youth have a longer unfortunate time in those spaces. And so those are some of the other disparities. And so I'll pause there.
Okay, thank you so much for your explanation, Moneka. And next we'll have Tonya Covington, and just kind of explain what you are currently working on or have implemented in the fields of JDAI or restorative justice.
Okay, I was appointed by the mayor as the restorative justice coordinator for the city of Albuquerque. I have been on the JDAI committee and the Deep End committee, worked a lot with Carmela and Moneka. And what I am trying to do right now, one of my main goals is to try to get restorative justice into the Albuquerque school system. It's very, very badly needed. I think that a lot of the problems that they're having would be curtailed if they had a restorative justice, if both the teachers as well as students knew what restorative justice was and knew how to use it. We've seen from so very many of the things which other people have talked about is that in Bernalillo County, they've done an excellent job at reducing the number of kids who are in detention. Unfortunately, that has not reduced the disparity. So Black kids, Black and brown kids both, are still disproportionately kept in jail or probation or what have you. And one of the things that really has to be done in order to have that change is you have to work on that problem specifically. And I have been in meetings where people have, specifically said, "Why are we talking so much about Black youth?" And it's because if we can solve the problem of Black youth, then we've solved the problem of everybody. And so it is extremely important, and that's something that I'm very dedicated to. I'm putting together curriculum to be able to teach teachers over this next school year, and to be able to try and get this in, even though we don't necessarily have the support of the public schools administration. We certainly have a lot of interest from teachers and principals and parents. So I'll stop there.
That sounds great. I mean, this work it's very vital as we look to transition to a new way of doing these things, and especially since we were young at one point, we all had childhoods, and that moments in those times that got us to propelled us to where we kind of are today. So I think it's definitely something that I want to definitely instill in our young people today is, I had the chance, you should have the chance too. So our next question, I'll start off with Carmela again. It's going to be, just explain a time or experience that you've had working with the youth, and what was the most impactful outcome from that experience?
For me, I've worked with young people in different capacities for about 20 years now, whether it's through community work, at schools, here in the detention center. I've been in protective services as well. For me, really, what it's been for young people, specifically in juvenile justice, really has been when young people graduate. I think for me, when I see a young person who actually is able to graduate high school, facing all the barriers that they've had, or labels, or some of those things that they've experienced in life through the education system, whether they're in the detention center or not, just being able to graduate and really have incentive and coming into their own as young people. As you mentioned, Joshua, some of us have been young people once ourselves. Some of us have been through the system, so we know the impact of that. But some of us are sitting here today because someone encouraged us to keep going. And so for me personally, when I see a young person, whether it's a little success or a big success like a graduation, and moving forward in their life and really transitioning into adulthood, that has always been positive for me in this space.
Awesome. And on that note, I would like to say shout out to class of 2022. Here at the Expo, we've been seeing the high school graduations, and I mean, what a time to be a high schooler, I can say, like during these last few years, and to see that they finally made it. We know they got resilience. That's for sure. And so I'll go to Leon Howard, and same question, just explain an experience that you've had working with youth, and what's the most impactful outcome from that experience?
Yeah, thank you. I think one thing when I hear you say like we were all once youth too, I still feel like that punk kid who grew up here in Albuquerque. I graduated from Highland High School. And the access point for me was kind of by happenstance getting, yes, Kathy, go Hornets, getting the opportunity to work at a law firm as a runner. It's kind of an outdated position because everything is moved electronic, but my job was literally to run around downtown, file documents, drop documents off, pick documents up, things like that. And so if it wasn't for that opportunity, I wouldn't have been around lawyers to gain those type of mentors to be able to visualize, myself in that type of role. And so mentorship is so important in creating access points. Specific to this conversation, one rewarding experience I had is actually on a case, and it's outside of Wilson Middle School. It's where I went to middle school. Is the area I grew up in, and there was a disturbance called into the area, and officers showed up, APD officers showed up, and just started putting all of these Black middle school age children in handcuffs in front of their parents, and kind of escalated, and they ended up taking 7 or 8 children down and booking them in based on officer discretion misdemeanors. And what we're able to kind of show through that case, and it's through a lot of data that the county had collected, is when officers are confronted with officer discretion decisions, when they can call parents. And in this particular instance, they didn't have any parents that they needed to call. The parents were right there to be able to come pick the children up, and if it's a serious enough situation, summons them to court or take them down and book them. And we all know, I mean, kind of the experience of being handcuffed, driven down to a facility, being booked into detention, waiting for your parents to pick you up, like how traumatic of an experience that is. And so working through that case, being able to show some disparities in selective prosecution when non-Black children are confronted with or suspected of or charged with very misdemeanor delinquent acts, kind of the disparities there. And so working with the children, getting them ready for their depositions, and giving them a voice, and showing them that they could kind of stand up and be a little bit closer to the legal process to vindicate their own rights. And the case settled for each individual that was a part of that case, and it was a positive outcome for them and their families. Not necessarily restorative, I don't think, because I think our legal system is designed for restorative justice. It's very confrontational system. Even when you kind of resolve things through the mediation process, a lot of times I don't feel like you really bring parties together to find understanding. And it's not like the kids ever got to see the officers that put them in handcuffs and have a moment where there was this true kind of restorative process. All that said, very rewarding to go back to one of the schools I went to and work with some of the kids through a case where their rights were violated.
That was touching. Wow. Yeah, because I can't imagine. I haven't had me, so I can't imagine how traumatizing that process is. I just kind of remember when I was a juvenile correctional officer, kind of seeing them come in, and I'm like, I would not want to be in that position, but I'm happy that their case is settled. So that's amazing for them, and I like to see that more often too. So we'll go to Moneka Stevens next, and I will ask same question. Just explain experience you had working with the youth and the most impact outcome of that experience?
Thank you for that question. That is a very complex question because there's millions of
It is.
experiences to name. I got into working with young people because myself, growing up in the community, I got a lot of mentorship from adults in my community and adults that looked like me. That was so important. And I dropped out of high school. And speaking of officer discretion, what Leon was sharing is instead of me being taken to the detention center, I was taken to a group home. And that's the only reason I wasn't in the system. And someone in my community saw me being arrested in handcuffs. And once I came home, offered me a job, right? Didn't judge me on that situation, didn't ask me about that situation, and believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And that led my path to working with young people. And I will cherish that forever. And I could never repay all the adults that have mentored me and continue to mentor me. And so I've always wanted and desired to give that back. I'll share that with working with young people in so many different aspects, especially youth organizing. That's my passion, like working with young people as change agents. What I've learned the most is young people are leaders of today. They're told often they're leaders of the future, but they're leaders of today. They're change agents making huge impacts. That the other thing that I learned is for me to always be a learner. I learn more from young people than they could ever learn from me. And that's just been like so critical, is like, how can I learn? How can I grow? And asking what like their needs are and how to support them in their journey, and them being able to define what success looks like for them, their own journey. And so for me, it's always learning how to be a better mentor. I'll share that there's a young person that I've known in my community, and I'm very blessed that I got to work and mentor young people in the community that I grew up in, which is South Broadway, the Sticks. Just watching this young person grow and like do community organizing, but through art, right? And watching them create and find their self, their identity. And man, it's been beautiful to watch and see. And that it's a gift for me to be part of that space. And I'm watching them mentor other young people as well, and them going into education. And so like, that's powerful to watch young people fulfill like journeys that they've desired. And so, yeah, I just really am humble and always wanting to learn and grow in those areas.
That is awesome. Definitely, it's important to have that pedagogical mind frame, because you can always learn from young kids. And I know sometimes that we sometimes judge them for, but it's like, again, we got to go back to when we were young, and they're growing, and we just got to allow them to grow and have the freedom to do that. And that's what this is about. So next question will be same question, just be to Tonya Covington. Just explain experience that you have had working with the youth, and what's the most impactful outcome from that experience.
All right. I've been working with youth for decades, and I am one of those people who always feels like I learn a whole lot more from them than I teach them. And one of the things that I work at doing all the time is trying to let them know how valued and how brilliant they are, so that they can continue walking the path. But for a long time, I was running one of the only restorative justice programs in northern New Mexico. And it was for youth that we were trying to keep out of the juvenile system. And one of the things that I've often had to tell parents and adults is it's not fair for us to expect kids to know something they've never been taught. And one of the best, most rewarding experiences for me. At the end of my classes, we always did evaluations and talked to kids and asked them for their suggestions on how to make the program better. And I had a young man say to me, you know, I didn't know that I could do anything other than hit, because that's all anybody in my family does. I didn't know there was another way. And I thought, well, thank God you now have new skills. You now, know that there's another way. And I know from working, with young people that that young person is not only going to remember that, but he's also going to teach his family. And so for me, that's very, very rewarding, and part of the reason why I'm so adamant about trying to get this into the schools so that we can teach kids another set of skills. If they know how to resolve their own conflicts, then they don't need to call the police, and they certainly don't need to go and get a gun, because they know how to handle it. And kids are brilliant at doing it. So I feel like we just have to make that available for them.
That is true. Having that facilitating mindset always, and shout out the Delta pluses. It's always good to have that feedback too. So going on to the next question here, I'll be for Carmela, and it's kind of might be a little complicated, but it's what is an initiative that you would like to see in place? I mean, I guess just imagine like no roadblocks, but I would like this initiative to be in place.
Moneka brought it up a little bit ago, with youth who are working in the community leadership roles, is the arts, the music, athletics, things we've lost over time in schools that allowed young people to find their spaces, having that available in the community, access to that in the community, not because you got in trouble in the juvenile justice system, but true access to these opportunities, as Leon said, these wonderful opportunities that are out there in the community, and being supported by the community. I can't wait to see the reimagining that the Albuquerque Youth Justice Collaborative is doing and working really hard on. I can't wait to see, as it expands and what that means to our young people. Other things is life coaching, mentorship, but in the sense that we're helping young people find their way. It's not that I just found a buddy in the community. It's someone I can depend on, rely on, gather knowledge from, and grow with over time. And so those are some of the things on top of course, access to mental health resources, and even in that, culturally relevant services for our young people, and attaching them to those culturally relevant services in the community. So those are some of the things, if I could, I would love to see more of.
Definitely, we need to get our young people moving and grooving and enjoying the outside time, and also just have the spaces for them. I remember I was talking to Imani, I believe, and thinking about a peer mentorship for our young people. I mean, that would be great. I remember having a peer mentor in college. Imagine having that in high school, the kind of, especially for those upperclassmen that are nervous about the next step. All right, so we'll go to Leon Howard with the same question. What's an initiative that you would like to see in place?
Yeah, I might bounce around a little bit. There's something in reparations, not only for descendants of slavery, but for the damage that the war on drugs did to our communities. You had the chief policy counsel for Richard Nixon basically come out and say it was a design aimed at Black families. And so something around the restoration of Black families. There's just so much damage there. The other, this is kind of tangible, but has to do kind of with the damage that's done for Black youth, especially young Black boys, around, mythic masculinity and super predators, and cease real efforts by the media to change how Black children are portrayed, and the way that Black men and athletes are kind of fetishized and only looked at as their bodies, only valued for their bodies and talents. And so there's so much to overcome as it is, and the media really feeds this beast and these narratives around Black children that's damaging and feeds so much bias in our society. And then another practical thing I'd like to see that I touched on earlier really has to do with taking a hard look at officer discretion charges when they're interacting with youthful suspected offenders or actual offenders, and how those situations are handled. So really broad topics there, but those are, when I saw the question, those are kind of the first things that jumped to my mind when if I had was able to just start the policy, had all the funding in the world, those would be some starting points for me.
Yeah, I think that's great, especially adding that economic factor to it with reparations. The damage has been done. It's been done for 400 years, and then compounded by this war on drugs and things. It would be nice to implement some things, as well as, since the damage is done, also include a unlearning and relearning factor on all sides, especially for us, in the Black community. It's very important. Next question, well, same question, but we'll go to Moneka Stevens. What's an initiative that you would like to see in place?
So many. I think they're all grounded in communities of care. I think of like our elder and what Tonya Covington is doing around creating transformative justice, restorative justice center. Like, that's a model of creating communities of care, right? So that we can decolonize and unlearn these punitive systems that were forced on us through colonialization, right? Our communities before those things existed had restorative justice practices, and how do we bring that? I think also about like communities of care can look very differently. I think or reflect on all the money that's being pushed into the city of Albuquerque's police department. Like, they once were at 175 million, 205, and now they're at 225. We're a city that has two operations, like Operation Relentless Pursuit, Operation Legend. Those operations target communities of color, and they specifically target young people and lock them up. And this is focused on the criminalization of young people. If we could defund that money and put that money into creating communities of care and address root causes and support community, imagine what our communities could look like, whether that's transformative justice work that's happening, whether that's food access, whether that's jobs. There's so many different things that we can do. And so I think really looking at some of the roots that are happening, and Leon talked about healing, right? Like, how do we create those healing spaces that's so needed for our communities because of the generational trauma that's happening, like breaking the stigma of mental health and having more mental health providers. I think love the Black mental health work that's happening, and there's a list of providers that we can now share with our community members. So I think all of that is embedded in communities of care, and there's so much that's needed. And I look toward like all of our community members and young people to make those decisions about what that looks like. And for me, the way is taking the money that's invested in the wrong thing and investing it in the right thing, because people should also be honored for their time. And like, how are young people being compensated and leading those spaces through job and career opportunities? as well. And so that's some of the things that I reflect on that could occur.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, definitely might be an economical term, but opportunity costs. We have to funnel the money and finances initiatives that we want, and we can't have the mixed messaging in where the money is going. If it's going to go to this route, then it has to be this route. It can't keep on just going to those players that are targeting our youth and communities. All right, Tonya. So same question. What is an initiative that you would like to see in place?
Well, I definitely agree with everything that the other panelists have said, and including you, Joshua. I feel like we really do have to put our money where our mouth is. And one of the things that, I always say is commitment equals cash. So don't tell me that it's something that you're interested in without opening up your wallet at the same time. I would certainly like to see more mentoring be available. I would like to see more culturally relevant mental health services. I'm not sure that most people know that in the state of New Mexico, a young person can ask for and receive mental health services at the age of 14 without having to get a parent's permission. We need to let everybody know that so that they can use those services. And again, I would really like to have restorative justice be in all the school systems so that we can stop using punitive means. And so that kids could learn that they really can they can control their own destiny.
Thank you so much for your answer, Tonya. We put your money where your mouth is. That's what we gotta do that. So after this panel, we have the youth panel. So I wanted to do the last question as we transition to the youth panel. How would you incorporate Black youth in decision making or youth in general? I'll talk to Carmela first.
In general, there's often times what the system does is they invite young people to the table without preparing them, without, giving them kind of a heads up historically of what the conversation is going to be. And then when youth come to the table, they really don't have that voice or allowed to speak maybe most of the meeting sometimes, or sometimes they vote on things and it's almost like we're rubber stamping oh, there was a youth here, right? And so check, right? But are we really listening to the youth? And I think for me, as a system stakeholder, is really having youth at the table in a safe space and really having youth voice heard where adults can sit back and actually listen to what's going on for them in their communities, in their lives, etc. And actually looking towards community-based solutions that young people might have. Because as Moneka said, many of them are leaders. They're leaders of today. They have a lot of answers to questions we have. And so if we just took the time to really engage with our young people in a thoughtful and more honest way and transparent way, I think young people will really help us solve some of those things that we've been trying to tackle for some time now. So just more thoughtful way of inviting young people to the table.
Well, I guess you might be starting to get in here, but so yeah, definitely, I would say that one of the things I was able to read were the ideas of facilitations done in that space, even having youth have their own space first to do the facilitating within themselves, and then bring it to the table so the adults don't take all the credit. So go to the next. We'll go to Leon Howard. Just what would you think? How would you incorporate Black youth in decision making or
Yeah, so
youth?
this is really interesting. It what 7-8 years ago now, when the DOJ v. Albuquerque matter came to a resolution through the court approved settlement agreement. I was with a group of attorneys, including Dean Mathewson at the law school, that represented some community groups. And one thing we highlighted to the court to give these community groups some voice in that process. I know it's loaded to even bring up that process and where we're at after all this time of having DOJ here. But one thing we highlighted was that the youth was absent from the process. And so, that just gives us a peek into like one of the most impacted communities in APD's usage or pattern and practice of the use of excessive force, and they're absent from any part of the process. And aside from that, the only thing I can really think of, because decision making, once people feel like they're being heard in a process, that their voice matters, you just never know. Like as a manager in my own position, it just makes you a better leader once you bring more people to the table, hear more perspectives, and make sure people feel heard. And then my last point on this is, in all these decision-making processes, it's that access point. Sometimes you just don't know who the child is going to meet, what type of mentors they're going to gain, what they're going to learn about the process that they can take with them in their studies, what they can start envisioning for themselves once they see role models. And so for me, it's really about an access point to bring youth into decision-making process and policy.
Oh wow, I was unmuted the whole time. Didn't know. Anyway, well, thank you for that response. Again, it's great access. That's I'm about equity, access, and I am somewhat of a wanderer, so I love those interactions that you meet up with someone that you don't even know, you never know. It's just being out there and being present. You never know who you could talk to or meet, and they can change your life. So it's always important and good. All right, Miss Tonya Covington. So I know you mentioned it before, but how would you incorporate Black youth in decision making?
Well, I believe in inviting them in on everything that has to do with them. I also think it's imperatively important that they be invited initially, not have the group come together and then think of them in the last minute and say, oh, let's bring some youth in. Youth have to be part of deciding what the group is, how the group is going to go and coalesce right from the very beginning, so that they're seen as equal participants in whatever is going on, and that they do have equal say in decision making. So that's one of the things that we certainly try and do. I'm working with a lot of interns also through Moneka's programs. And we're trying to make sure that's happening. Also through the Peace and Justice Center, we have created a space for youth to be able to come and talk about, especially youth of color, to be able to come together and talk about the experiences that they have with racism in school. They can do that. They lead the entire group. They set the agenda. They decide the dates. All we do is give them the space and let them know that they are fully supported. So yeah, so there's a lot of that actually that is going on that people just don't know about.
That is great. That is so awesome. Yes, as we close for break soon, I just wanted to say again, thank you for being a part of this wonderful event and this important conversation of disturbing this trend of turning adolescent behavior and into criminalizing, and how we're going to work to reverse that. Things that we're doing at all levels of the legal, the city, the county, and all those. It's just vital as we start to move in these spaces in the right direction. And there is going to be resistance. That's just the way of the game. But I think as long as we're passionate enough, we got the drive, and we get the community involved and kind of capitalize on that wave of energy, we'll get there. We'll get there. So again, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists. It is so wonderful to hear about the amazing work that you're doing, the innovative things that are happening here in New Mexico. We are going to take a 5-minute break. And when we come back, we'll be hearing from some of the youth in New Mexico, really hearing from them what their experiences are and what we can do to support them in the calls for action that they're asking for. So we will see you all right back here at 4 o'clock. Thanks.